emerging and talk about the next steps. So this illustration gives you a sense of our process that we're working through. It has 3 phases. The first one about really determining sort of from McMinnville's perspective who we are. The second phase about where we want to go, and the third one how we're going to get there. During the first phase, we're right here at council meeting number 1. We had a number of values workshops just last week. During the first phase, we want to talk about McMinnville's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, vision, mission, values, and strategic priorities. Key upcoming meeting about that will be a workshop on March 2nd to try and identify what those strategic priority areas are. And then through the second phase, we'll talk about what we're going to do about them. And in the third phase, sort of timelines and work plans to get there. This is the first of 4 opportunities to interact with the council at a council meeting. We'll also invite you all to the workshop on March 2nd. So we'll see you again one time further in this first phase and then during each of the other phases through the process. To just introduce this, I want to give you all a chance to go through the same exercise that the work groups did last week, and that 1,000 McMinnville residents have gone on the online survey that we've had. That's been going very well. We're just approaching 1,000 answers. So if you've already answered the survey, you'll be familiar with the questions I'm about to pose. But that doesn't mean I don't want to give you a chance to do it together in this meeting. So I want to ask you 3 questions. And as I ask these questions, I want you to formulate your answer in either, I wish that wasn't whining, but I don't know what to do about it. I want you to either write your answer down or at least commit it enough to memory that you don't change it when you hear what other people say. And I'm going to record these up on the flip chart, so there's extra credit for brevity in your answers to these questions. So the first question, I'm going to ask all 3 questions, and then I'll ask you to just share one by one what your answers are. So the first question is, what do you personally value about living in McMinnville? Again, just either write it down or just commit to memory your thought. Hopefully just a couple of words or a phrase. Is that better? Second question, describe McMinnville in a single word.
Have your cell phone in your pocket?
Yes, I have my cell phone in my pocket.
Would you give that to me? Maybe that might be interfering with the mic. He's going to get into your contact list, Brian.
I've never had my cell phone confiscated during a city council meeting before. This is an exciting moment in my career.
It's not helping. You can have it back.
So what do you personally value about living in McMinnville? And then describe McMinnville in a single word. And the third and final question, not as much fun as the first 2, framing what is your greatest fear for McMinnville? So I want to give you a chance then to share. Let's start with the first question about values. And just one by one, I'm going to start down at the far end.
Alan?
Yeah. What do you personally value about living in McMinnville? All right. We're going to. Yes, you just get. I got this piece of paper. Everybody's got to share it. So, one answer. Yes.
If I was to pick one, probably.
Hang on just a second.
Yeah.
Couldn't pull it off.
I was told just before the meeting that it was a brand new microphone. I knew that was not good news.
Still too hot.
Okay, I'm talking now.
We need to turn it down, okay.
Is there like a handheld that would be easier to use?
I'll look into that, go ahead.
Okay, so
I honestly feel like the mic is a distraction.
Yeah, I can hear you, fine. I don't know about the people in the back.
Yeah.
So what do you personally value about living in McMinnville?
Well, at the top of the list would be a word that we use quite a bit is livability. And we use it so much that it doesn't sound like a very new word, but basically we get to lead our lives the way we see fit in McMinnville, and the opportunities are there for us to do that.
Test one.
And Remy, what do you personally value about living in McMinnville?
Community?
Community.
Wendy?
Community vitality. I mean, and similar to the previous one, but the vitality of the community.
Okay, Mr. Mayor?
I'd use livability, but I knew that would be used, so I'm saying I love the smaller aspect of the community that provides for our needs.
Jeff, are you going to weigh in, or are you going to? Counselor?
Community commitment or capacity. Another way of saying it is volunteerism.
All right. Do you want me to put the microphone over there by that so we can all hear it better? Community. We all did very well on the brevity criteria. Thank you. Okay, and describing McMinnville in a single word. Let's start at this end and go the other way. Exquisite, nice. Fun, nice.
Home?
This is great. You folks should run for city council. Verdant?
I'm following your rules and not changing mine to home, even though I like that better than the original one I thought of. Quality.
Quality?
Quality.
A lot of good ones, not much left. But I'll take, civil. Civil, yeah.
Okay, that was fun and eloquent and made us all get warm and fuzzy. So now let's be a little more sober. What's your biggest fear for McMinnville? Let's start down there.
Something that we've planned for and developed through the years. I would say growth.
Okay.
This is broad and non-specific, but in the cart before the horse.
Similar to Alan's, but being not having growth into a larger community, damage,
Damage from growth.
And I'm down that same path, Brian, but it would be growth that's not planned for.
Accelerated growth / losing its charm, character, and feeling.
So fairly succinct there that for all of you, and it seemed to me that there is some real patterns there. Seem to have a lot of consensus about livability, community vitality, small town character providing for needs, volunteerism and spirit, community and charm, exquisite, fun, beautiful, home, verdant, quality, and civil. Those are really eloquent words. And then it seems that there's a real theme with sort of fears about growth, getting the cart before the horse, damage from growth, unplanned growth, complacency, decline, and accelerated growth leading to loss of character and feeling. I think that just really a strong kind of consensus as you look across those. We asked everybody that filled out the survey to answer the same questions, and the next time I'm here, I'll be sharing with you the results of all of that from the community. We also had a similar conversation in several focus groups last week, and we have a couple focus groups coming up focusing on the Latino community, so we'll try and get some feedback from all of those. The other thing that we did during the focus groups last week was start talking about the components of a strategic plan, which begin with a vision and mission and values for the organization, which we're kind of these questions are beginning to frame that, and I'll share some thinking from some of the groups in a moment. And then that will lead us to goals, actions, and measures by the time we get to the end of the strategic plan by early fall. Right now, today, we're focusing at the beginning of this on the vision, mission, and values. And defining those a little further, a vision is an overarching statement that describes where you want the organization to be in the future. It describes a future state. We want to be the best community on the planet, or whatever your vision is. A mission is a statement of organizational purpose that defines who you are, your products, your services, your customers, and overall strengths. That is, what is the city of McMinnville as an organization and how does it operate? And then values are foundational ideas that depict how McMinnville will operate in pursuing its vision and mission. So it's sort of something about who the city is going to be and how you're going to operate in terms of those things moving forward. So with all three of the focus groups we did last week and with the project leadership group, we asked them not to try and craft these statements. The city already has some statements along these lines, and we'll come back at your next meeting later this month to talk about whether or not you want to adjust the current statements. But we asked people to talk about what are some of the elements that might happen in that. And we convened 3 groups during the day. And I know you can't read all the words on here. I'll highlight some of the key words in a moment. But we asked 3 groups to talk about vision, mission, and values, and what are some of the elements of what those could be. The first group was a group of city employees who described themselves as boots on the ground, folks that were sort of frontline staff out there doing the work of the city, as opposed to all the department heads or the leadership. The second group was the McMinnville Leadership Council, who is a regular group that meets once a month of community leaders, and we honed in on their regular monthly meeting. We had a really good turnout at that meeting, a lot of folks that you're all familiar with. And then the third group we called the young leaders, who basically their organizing principle is that they weren't the other group. And they were younger than the other group. My favorite moment of that conversation was that the leadership council talked about this is for the children's children. And during the following group, they said, this is for our children. And at some point, it occurred to us that they were all talking about the same kids. I guess it was just a generation going forward. And then you could see that this picture, it doesn't come through very clearly, but this was the young leaders group who insisted at the end of their conversation that they be able to see the wall graphic from the leadership group so they could compare the results of the two. And they were a very engaged group. I encouraged them all at the end of the meeting to run for the city council, so look out for them. They're clearly folks that are very engaged in the community and want to be engaged going forward. So these groups, and then I said the project leadership kind of steering committee came together in the evening and reviewed all of those highlights from the different groups and kind of identified where the common themes were and pulled some of those pieces together. And hopefully you can read this one better than you could read the last one. Some of the vision things that seemed to turn up in all 3 of the groups were about honoring the past and embracing progress. That seemed to be a huge theme for McMinnville to me. Is you got this lovely town that you all just described. You love this town. A lot of people love this town. And so we want to honor that and not lose its character, but at the same time, we need to embrace where the community is going in the future and be part of that. People want the community to be proactive. Stewardship came up in all 3 groups as something, you got something to protect here, and being good stewards was important, and being progressive were some of those issues. When we talked about mission, those people were a lot more prolific there, and some of these words may be in the wrong column, but that's where they came up in the groups, and we'll work on crafting that for your next meeting and getting your input. But mission, catalyst, collaborative, basic services for a growing city. And that was a theme actually that came up in all the groups, is really attending to basic services and making sure we were doing the right thing in a city that's changing, as you're all very aware of. Compassionate, collective leadership, leveraging partnerships, recognizing the city can't do everything and you need to work with all your partners in the community to leverage good results. Being transparent, being service-oriented, and being efficient and effective were all important things. Sort of fiscal responsibility came up throughout the conversation, throughout the day. On values, future-oriented, inclusive, civic discourse and civility, as it came up here. Fiscally responsible, engagement, volunteerism, pulling the community in, service, embracing change and facing forward. And a lot of laughter came out of this thing that the young leaders called dad mode, which, being 20 years older than anybody in that conversation, I had to stop and say, huh? What does that mean? And I think what they meant there was, it's important that the city and all of us, referring to them, be mature and recognize we have to take care of basic services and doing the job of the city, and we can't get all wound up about big, exciting visions without taking care of sort of basic services. And it was interesting, that first came up and there was a lot of laughter about the dad mode thing, but then the next group picked it up and it became really a theme, as people recognizing that it's easy during visioning and strategic planning to get all excited about the next new idea, but we really need to take care of business. And I was quite impressed with this group of 30-somethings who were recognizing we got to take care of business. So that's my spiel on where we are in this process. Would be happy to hear your feedback, comments, or questions. The next steps, immediate next steps, is the community-wide survey is still live. So for anybody that's in the audience or watching, or you want to reach out to them, the survey, you can get to it through the city's website. It'll be live through the end of this week. So if anybody hasn't and wants to do it, we're going to close it down at the end of the week. And then we have the strategic planning workshop on March 2nd, in which we will try and identify what are the 6 or 7 or 8 big buckets that we think are the priority areas. We won't figure out what to do about them, but we want to try and define what does the strategic plan need to cover. So that's where we are. Questions or comments?
So questions for Brian? Well, I was really pleased to see the survey come out. I received it in a number of different formats. News Register sent out and asked for participation, and so there were a number of opportunities for me to go in. I only went in once, but again, I was pleased that I think we're getting some real good coverage from that perspective. Jeff, would you like to give any comments from your perspective?
Thank you, Mayor. What I tried to do was to get to each of the focus groups at the beginning, introduce myself to the folks that I didn't know and thank them. I've had the chance to bump into probably half a dozen or more of the folks who participated. Everybody, I think, was really excited, felt like it was really productive. I've debriefed with about half of the executive team since the project leadership team meeting, and I think we recognize this is about step 2 of 1,000 steps that we're going to take over the next 9 months. I think we're doing the right work for the community. I think we're doing the right work for the organization. We are at that sort of messy early point where there's just a lot of stuff to soak in, and for folks who are pretty task-oriented and really want to get to work, this is the uncomfortable part. But it will come together. There'll be a lot of work. We're going to stay engaged. I think one of the challenges will be not just keeping people engaged because there's a lot of interest, but making sure the time we have is productive, and that's what Brian and his team will be working on. There'll be a lot of information that comes to you for the next session, so it'll be we haven't buttoned down exactly how much time it's going to be. It won't be a full day, but it's going to be more than 45 minutes.
Wendy?
Thank you for the information. Thank you for the information and the overview. It's really exciting to be starting this process, so thanks for your help with it. Can you just describe a little bit how you formed the focus groups, how you decided who was going to be on and invited them?
So we asked Jeff to identify we specifically asked for a group of city employees who weren't exactly the usual suspects, but would be engaged. We knew that the leadership council existed, and we thought those were people that we'd all go interview one-on-one, and it would be more efficient to just get them in a group, and that worked really well. And then from the very beginning, from the request for proposals, there's been an interest in sort of youth and the next generation of leadership. I've had the great good fortune in my career to work with McMinnville off and on for many years, and some of my oldest friends were involved in whether or not we were the right consultants, and one of their comments to me was, this isn't about us old guys, it's about the next generation. So we identified that as a key group, and then Jeff played a key role in identifying those folks. Do you want to?
Sure. We actually ended up brainstorming at the executive team probably 4 or 5 names of folks that we invited to participate. I think all but one of them chose to. And then we ask each of them, are there 2 or 3 other people who you consider young leaders in the community that you know of, that you listen to, that you engage with? And each of them gave us names, and we just started asking folks to try to get a group of people who represented entrepreneurs and social service providers and volunteers and business people. We intentionally tried to keep it young, like under 40 young, and we ended up with, I think, a pretty good balance. I sent those names out of the invitees to the council. You may not have gotten a chance to look at that. Maybe, Brian, you could talk a few minutes about how we're going to handle the Latino focus groups. We're using a slightly different process to assemble those folks, but you can talk about that a little bit.
So we've got, we did, when the city sent out the request for proposals, they identified youth and the Latino community as important voices that aren't always as engaged as they could be. So we actually spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out how to address that. I do a lot of this work all around the Pacific Northwest, and I have people that I work with all the time that do outreach to different communities, and particularly Latino communities, which is a big population. But I recognize that bringing in folks that spoke Spanish from out of town wasn't near as good as getting folks that really plugged into that community, and we asked several different sources, and Arturo Vargas's name came up several times from several different sources, and the mayor and Jeff both agreed that that was a dependable name, so we asked him to join our team. He lives here in town. He's doing some consulting work for the Oregon Community Foundation and convening these tables of 12 that I think some of you have participated in, trying to sort of do more outreach in the Latino community throughout the Willamette Valley. So he seemed like a great choice, and he joined us for some of the sessions last week, and he's reaching out and forming a couple of different groups of Latino voices that aren't the usual suspects, and he'll be meeting with them over the next couple of weeks before we do that meeting on March 2nd.
Yeah. Any other questions for Brian? Again, this is just all the underworkings to help us get to that point where, where we have been for a good 6 months. We want to get it going, but there's this process. And I think each and every one of you, as I've had an opportunity to talk to you and Jeff's had an opportunity, we really understand the process, and that we will have a quality product at the end of August or thereafter. And we're willing to do it right, so that we can be looking 15 and 20 years out into the future. So, well, thank you, Brian.
Thank you. And thanks for the alternate microphone.
Yeah.
You can have your phone back now.
Okay, what we're going to do now is have an opportunity to hear from our Affordable Housing Task Force. And this is our homeless subcommittee report, and Remy will lead us in that. We had our monthly meeting yesterday afternoon, so kind of hot off the press a little bit where we're at. So Remy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of what the subcommittee on homelessness has been working on, and then really hone in on one of our subgroups where we would like to get some feedback from the council. So from the start, we elected to organize this subcommittee in a way in which members of the committee would self-select to a subgroup of the homeless population and focus their attention on efforts to reduce homelessness within that subgroup. Knowing that we have a large population of homeless residents, of course, there's a lot of diversity within that in many, many ways. Age as only one of them, status as a veteran, which you may recall is one of the leading contributors to being homeless in Oregon right now. amongst others. So we've identified many subgroups within our homeless population and have started by focusing in on just 4 of those subgroups. So they are veterans, and with veterans and focusing on veterans, we've probably seen some of the most success in that we are able to say that McMinnville is now operating at a functional 0, meaning that when a homeless vet is identified, there's enough communication happening between the supportive organizations that within a very short period of time, there are a lot of options for finding housing for those veterans. And we have a lot of the people that are specifically working on housing our homeless veterans are also tied into a lot of other organizations which are already offering those supportive services. So the Housing Authority and YCAP, who also are working regularly at the county and state level, which means they're also aware of other programs and monies that are available. We were happy to hear yesterday that Housing Authority recently received a $400,000 grant from the state that's focused on home repair for veterans. So that you know, and everybody in the audience knows, if you know a veteran that is in need of home repair at this time or something that could keep them from having their home become uninhabitable, there are monies available for that through the Housing Authority of Yamhill County. So they continue to do work. We've seen very interesting projects happening through another subgroup, which is sheltering senior women. One reason this became a focus, senior women became a focus for the homeless subcommittee, is because I sadly report that senior women are our fastest growing population of homeless in McMinnville. And so we see an interesting project happening that has a lot of the momentum and the drive is coming from Covenant Church, and they are exploring a very forward-thinking idea about how to create housing for senior women on the brink of homelessness, and that is moving forward. And they're also tied in with ISA, and ISA is helping to design some of these homes. I think I have that correct. Yeah. So a lot of the successes that we're seeing are kind of attributable to 2 different things. One is the communication and the organization that's happening between different community partners. And then the second part is having a driving force behind that to help create that success. We also have a subgroup focused on sheltering youth. Identifying youth as anybody under the age of 18, that is currently our largest population of homeless in McMinnville. About 45% of our homeless are under the age of 18. We've had a lot of stops and starts within that program. The success to report is that we're working with the county, and they are motivated in helping us find some more successes. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of check marks on accomplishments within that yet. And then I'm going to end with the subgroup that's working on vehicular homeless. And as I said before, I'm ending here because we're at a bit of a crossroads, and we would like some feedback from council on how to proceed at this time. So we've had successes and failures with our vehicular homeless subgroup. And I think that you're all very aware that a lot of the attention and feedback we've been getting from the community is based in frustrations with the vehicular homeless that are living in McMinnville currently. We've largely modeled a plan that we would like to bring forward. which is, the program is called Car Camping. And we've largely focused on replicating a successful model that's coming out of Eugene Springfield. There they have a driving force, which is St. Vincent de Paul. And with the assist of the city in 2002, started a very successful car camping program. The basic tenets of how the car camping program would work would be that there would be a site designation. Those sites can be in just about any zone. So that means that they could be on city-owned property, they could be on privately owned property, they might be in industrial neighborhoods, they could be at churches, they could be outside just about any business. Of course, you need a willing property owner, and then you team that with access to sanitation, sanitation being a porta potty and hand washing availability, and garbage service. So as our team started meeting and working, we were looking for those three things, those four things, pardon me. Garbage service, porta potty service, site selection, and a site manager. We immediately found some great success in speaking with Recology. They were willing to partner with us in providing garbage service within the city limits. We found a willing partner in site management with Provoking Hope. We did a lot of outreach on the porta potties, but as of yet have not found somebody to sponsor or pay for the porta potties. And then we started in on site designation. And in many ways, that's where we hit our biggest challenge. Of course, as we started talking to different potential sites about their willingness to house a vehicle, and this would be 1 or 2 vehicles for 90 days, where that vehicle would not need to move at all during that time. As we started engaging people in the conversation about site selection, Provoking Hope found another opportunity to provide the full-time services elsewhere in the county with a program that was further along in the process. So that was a bit of a setback, as you can imagine. So those are kind of some of the successes and the failures of where we've traveled. Now we're at a point where we have a much more clear idea of where we'd like to go. We have a much more clear idea of what we need to get there. And what I'm going to talk to you about now is kind of where we think we should travel, but we would like to do it with council's blessing, so to speak, because this takes staff time. And so if this is not of interest to council, then certainly we don't want to be squandering that resource. Before I talk about what we'd like to see, I want to tell you a success story that came out of Eugene, and I'm going to tell you the story of the failure that came out of Eugene too. So the great success story that we were told when we recently conference called with St. Vincent de Paul, and we were able to speak with both the retired director of St. Vincent de Paul and also their program manager. The great success story that he told us was that a number of years ago, after having launched this car camping program, not only were businesses regularly coming to them and saying that yes, they would like to be a host site, but it became much more specific. They had one business in particular. It was a junkyard, but at this junkyard they regularly had break-ins and burglaries, and people were stealing transmissions out of the cars that were there. And of course, that's regular burglary is a negative impact on a business. So they didn't only open up their site for one resident for 90 days. They opened up their site for, I believe it was 3 different residents at different parts of the business so that the perimeter of their business was covered, and they were very specific that they could have homeless residents with dogs. So that ended their burglaries. I think that's a great example of how the nonprofit, the city, which helps fund this program, and the drive of the people that are trying to change their lives can work together to create successes. The failure was that in the last 10 years, they've had to evict 4 people. It's not a huge failure. They're very clear with their contracts. There's no exchange of services or money, although one could argue that that was an exchange of service. There is no contractual obligation in exchange of service. This is not a program that has failed. It is a program that has succeeded through very clear behavioral guidelines. It's also a program that the City of Eugene reports significantly affected their budgeting. So the Eugene Police Department used to spend about $300,000 a year responding to calls, code enforcement complaints on vehicular homeless. That number was reduced to $91,000 a year. In the first year of this program, they responded to 1,432 calls. Side of this program is that there's a lot of education that happens. So you get a code enforcement complaint, and on that first call out, it is not only a response of move your car or move your RV, the response is also, okay, well, you have garbage outside your RV, or you have, there's this problem that's happening, and so here are the rules of our city, and if you can abide by these rules and change this aspect of what you're doing, then perhaps you will invite less code complaints. So they started their first year with 1,432 code enforcement calls, and in 2 years that number was reduced to 578 code enforcement calls. A major part of this, too, that I want to point out is that not only did the code enforcement complaints come down, but also in this aspect, St. Vincent de Paul took over as the first responders. So the police were no longer the first responder. Right? I have that correct, yeah? So St. Vincent de Paul would come out and do that first response, clarifying the rules, educating people that are living in their vehicles, and then also informing them about this car camping program. And so individuals had the opportunity to then get in line and sign up for the car camping program. Eugene runs their program in two different ways. They have one program for singles or couples who are living without children, and they have a different program for families with children. And there's some big differences in how those two programs are run. In both, in the singles and couples without children, each site is limited to 3 people. Unless an individual is being positioned, say, near anything where there might be children regularly, there is not, the individuals are not screened, but they agree to be screened. They agree to background checks. They agree to drug screening, but there's no assumption that because they're homeless, they've done anything wrong. So they're able to apply to live at any site. The individuals also then have to call in twice a week to see if they have been selected for one of these sites. Oftentimes, because this program is so successful in Eugene and Springfield, Oftentimes, homeless individuals will go out and seek out a site and find somebody that's willing, and then bring that site back to St. Vincent de Paul, which acts as a registered agent of the city to approve these sites. They will bring them back to St. Vincent de Paul to have their site taken care of. While we were talking to them, we talked a lot about some of the issues that we've had in McMinnville and some of the fears that have come up through conversation. If we have a approved, vouchered, permitted person living here in their vehicle, isn't it going to attract other vehicles for people to live there? Resolutely no. One, it became much more enforceable for the police, who were able to see the permit in the window and know that those people were permitted to be there. Second of all, the individuals that have gained that residency, that ability to stay in one place for 90 days, are extremely protective of that right. They want their sites to be clean. They don't want problems. They are finally given an opportunity to advocate for themselves and advocate to make their lives better, and they have this limited amount of time to do it. That translates back to the only having to evict 4 people in a 10-year span. We asked about the bathrooms. I think we all know that we've had lots of bathroom problems here, whether it's vandalism, unfortunately, a lot of IV drug use in bathrooms, and they have a very simple solution. All of the porta potties have a lock on them. The only person that has a key is the porta potty company and the resident. Part of the behavioral contract that is signed is that the resident agrees to keep the bathroom locked. If they don't keep the bathroom locked, they lose their site. As a very simple solution. The families operate a little bit differently. All of the families are drug screened, and there is more management that happens in that way. However, St. Vincent de Paul is acting as a site manager, not a case manager. There is no requirement for individuals in this program to necessarily be in any sort of case management program, but if they are, that's theirs to control. What St. Vincent de Paul specifically is doing is site management, visiting these sites at least once a week, bringing in the applications, because St. Vincent de Paul works closely with homeless residents in that area. They're able to put people together in a way in which they know they'll be successful, right? So alleviating conflicts, personal conflicts that can come about, things of that nature. Additionally, if there are problems with the site, St. Vincent de Paul is who goes in and responds and takes care of it. So you might be hearing this kind of heavy emphasis on St. Vincent de Paul, and what's very unique, or not unique, but what's very different about our approach versus the approach in Eugene is St. Vincent de Paul conceived this program, along with a number of supportive programs that have helped eliminate a lot of the problems they've encountered or were encountering with vehicular homeless in their area. They were able to show such a great benefit to the cities of Eugene and Springfield that they were then able to get funding through those cities that pay for the garbage service, pay for the recycling, and pay for the site management. What's significantly different here is that we as a city and our many departments and department heads have been working together and have been looking for that site manager, that nonprofit that's willing to step up and take the lead and do that site management. We have a new potential site manager in Champion Team. They've told us that they have the capacity to do this. I think they said a minimum 20 hours a week, or at least 20 hours a week, if not more, which would be more than adequate to run multiple sites. But of course, we're not looking for multiple sites to start. We want to start with one site. We had concerns from some of the other entities we talked with about whether or not they would be subject to tenant-landlord rules, and they're not. They're not, because there is no exchange of money. There's no, the site, the way they've constructed it, the site's not liable. They've been very thoughtful in it. They've not had any negative impact from, yeah, they've not suffered any liabilities from doing this. So where we are now, and before, if you have questions, before we get into them too much, we are at a place where we have put a lot of effort and energy into this. We see our neighbors being very successful with it. It was accomplished through city ordinances. It was accomplished with a strong community partner, which we think we've found multiple, both in Recology and in the willingness of Champion Team. And what we need to continue at this point is, one, what I mentioned earlier, kind of the blessing of council to continue the work in this way, in this vein. And we also need that porta potty aspect of it. I know that nobody is going to pledge any money here today. I don't think anybody's going to pledge any money here today. I don't know. Everyone's is in the audience, but we're talking about one porta potty per site, so we're talking about $1,000 a year. Certainly, the timing is good here. I have some ideas from our documentation of where those funds could come from without heavy redirection. We also know some things like the porta potties are less expensive to maintain than our parks restrooms, and we're having a lot of problems in them. Just to throw that out there. So I think I should open it to questions, but also be very clear that those are kind of the two things I would really appreciate coming out of today is, one, to say, yes, keep working on this. We think this is worth continuing to explore and trying to solidify, and it would be great if we could also open some conversation about funding that one porta potty per year as our pilot site.
Thank you, Remy. Let me just give you a little sense of this committee. It is a committee that's made up of numerous individuals that have real passion to come up with solutions. Our co-chairs on this is Jeff Sargent from YCAP, and Lindsay Manfred from the county, the health portion of the county. Remy's on that committee. Kelly, you're on the committee, or do?
Not on the committee. I
Okay.
just attended.
Kelly and I drop in quite often. Staff representation, Heather and Natalie are there from a staff representation. And so, again, just a broad grouping. We have representations from the churches. Mary Sterrett is on the committee. So it's a great representation of individuals. And personally, I would just say the discussions and the movement of discussion from when we started to where we are is monumental. I mean, coming up with programs that we can execute against and having plans, I take my hat off. I was just amazed yesterday to have the briefing that we had and where we're at. So thank you, Remy, because I know your involvement in there has been instrumental. So what I'd like to do is just open it up to council for any questions that Remy would have, and secondarily discussion. So
Well, first I want to thank Remy for all the work she's done on this. It's pretty good.
Really,
I'm
it's Heather.
impressed. Well, I'm sure Heather's done a ton of work too, and Matt has too, I know, and whoever else. But congratulations on that. I mean, great. A few things. Do you have any idea what the percentage of churches are in the Eugene-Springfield area that are offering this camping site?
I don't. I'm sure we could find out the breakdown. They just said that it was really split between businesses, city spots, and churches, by my recollection.
I do know, Counselor, that their families, they try to place on the churches, and they have 10 to 12 sites for families right now that are operating.
Great.
So at least they have 10 to 12 churches that are participating at this point.
And how long have they been doing this in Eugene? I missed that.
So this is a program that's been in place in Eugene for about 20 years. It really it really gained some traction in 2002 when St. Vincent de Paul hired William Weiss, I think is the name, Jeff?
Yes.
So it needed a champion. William was the champion, and he started partnering with the city to make this happen. When talking with the city, it was clear that from the city's perspective, without that sort of nonprofit partner and the champion, it wouldn't have come to bear, because they are the people who really put the program together and continue to administer and manage it, and the city plays its normal role within that program in terms of enforcement and zoning and everything else.
Okay, thank you, Heather.
So let me just add a little bit more. In addition to that, in the early years of the program, it was almost exclusively the faith community that provided leadership and sites for camping. The access to public property and the access to private property evolved over time. And I would guess in the early 4 or 5 years, it was almost entirely churches who stepped up and provided the space. The program also evolved. The early years, it was a single vehicle, single individual. Families came later, multiple vehicles came later. So the program that's in place now that Remy did a really good job of describing is one that evolved over a period of time. Eugene was earlier to adopt the program than Springfield was, and so what you see now really is a culmination of a long effort.
Yeah, and when we talked to both William, the champion of the program originally, who's now retired, and Keith Hayes, who's the administrator with St. Vincent de Paul at this point in time, when we talked to them and asked them, what would be your parting advice for us as we explore this, their parting advice was start small. Make sure that, it's something that's a match for McMinnville, nudge it in so that people get comfortable with it.
Okay, I have a couple more questions. I just wanted to clarify how the site couldn't be liable, or the landowner would not be liable for what happens on the site. How does that work?
Natalie?
So, the reason it doesn't fall under a landlord-tenant agreement, so to speak, is, as Remy already explained, there's no money exchange. It's just, it's sort of a contract, an agreement between the temporary tenant on the property and the owner of the property. The site manager and then criminal activity results, the police, they are the ones that really enforce it. The folks that do get to camp on the property, they sign an agreement, they agree to the rules, they understand that they can be asked to leave at any time. And as Remy indicated, they only have more private instances in the last 10 years that they've really come to a place where they've had to force them to out there.
Okay, thank you. Two more. The 90 days, was that from the inception? Was it always 90 days? Or it seems like a lot to ask of landowner to allow 90 days. I mean, 45 strings to mine. I realize the point of this is to give them time to find a job or find other lodging or whatever. And are RVs included in this too?
Are what included?
RVs included. Is it strictly car camping or is it
No, it's
RVs
so it's
involved?
vehicular camping,
It's
so RVs
vehicular.
are included. Talking to the two gentlemen that have been instrumental with the program, they both felt 90 days was, I don't know if that's what it originally started as, but their feelings on it was that 90 days was enough time for people to get the respite and, gather. The whole intention of the program is for those who are trying to get out of their situation. So not those who are choosing to be homeless and in their vehicles, but those who are trying to get out of their situation. So the 90 days gives them time to seek another situation, to gather their funds together, to work with the service programs. And they didn't want it to become a sort of long-term camping program. That's never been the intent of it.
So Heather, if an individual was there for 90 days, could they reapply for 90 days, or is 90 days the max that they can stay, let's say, for a year? How do they handle that?
It's clear that St. Vincent de Paul's administrator of the program is really the one that has the close relationship with all the individuals who are participating, is making weekly rounds with them, is engaged with them when they come into the service station and knows what services they're accessing. So he said to us, they go out at 60 days and say you have 30 days left, but clearly if someone is participating in program, making progress forward, showing good intention, that they'll extend it for a little bit so that they can get on their feet, and he's making those discretionary decisions. It's the St. Vincent de Paul is the sort of owner of the program, so to speak. People register with them. They're the ones administering it. They're the ones making decisions.
Okay, I have one other question and I'll quit. I'm sorry.
Please.
You said $1,000 a year. Is that for one site?
So we looked at what St. Vincent de Paul is paying is about $60 per month per site for a porta potty. We had done a little bit of our own. Our chief, who also is involved in this, had called around to a number of service, porta potty service providers in our area, and the cost was more around $100 per porta potty here. My guess is that's just based on availability.
That's actually a pretty good rate.
I think that's and I think that's about. So it's in that range of Eugene's 60. I think we pay $75 a month at our vineyard site. So 75 to 115 or so is a pretty good range. And so for one site, yes, that's where that's coming from, $1,000, $1,200 a year.
Okay, thank you, Remy.
Sal?
Remy and Heather and Susan, I really appreciate all of your work on this. It's a really challenging issue, and it's one of the things that motivated me to want to serve is addressing this, so I thank you for your work. If you've heard any of that, it would be a miracle. I just wanted to say I really support what you're doing. I appreciate it. I have a couple of questions about the Eugene and Springfield programs. Do we know what the annual cost is and how many sites they're currently servicing in either of those or both of those cities?
Yeah, I'll start on that and then I'll hand it over to Heather. So they're operating 42 sites for their singles and couples without children, and then as Heather said earlier, 10 to 12 sites for families. They weren't able to give us at the time the cost breakdown on just the site management, but we can tell you what they receive through the city. But when you hear that number, I want you to also know that also covers management of their service station. Their service station is a place, it's a warming or cooling shelter where people can go. They can list it as their address. They can shower, they can launder their clothing and belongings, and that's also where the offices are housed for both this program and for the related First Place Family Center. Correct?
So can I just clarify what you just said? the price that you're going to quote is the complete administrative cost for the program, plus the sites, plus something else?
Not quite.
No.
What we're going to quote is how much the cities of Eugene and Springfield pledge each year. And that's broken into a couple different numbers. When we talked to them, we asked a similar question, but they get their overall budget and divvy up their time. So they did not give us, from those numbers, they did not tell us specifically how much went into site management. They did tell us specifically about how many hours per week are dedicated towards that site management. They did give us the porta potty cost, and they did give us the garbage cost.
But this also includes a shelter in addition to that, right? An emergency shelter that, did you not say that as well?
The manager, the site manager, he is also the manager of their service station. And their service station serves multiple functions, not as an overnight shelter, but as a warming shelter, a cooling shelter, a place to register your address and do these other things. So the numbers that we have are not only specific to this program. Okay, but go ahead.
Counselor, just, so the city of Eugene, we don't have the city of Springfield numbers. The city of Eugene contracts with St. Vincent de Paul to be the registrant for the vehicular camping program. Their contract is about $89,000 a year through their annual budget, and then they do a mid-year grant of $50,000, so $139,000 total. And then the city of Springfield contributes a lesser amount because they have a lesser amount, the program's smaller in that city.
And if I'm correct, that additional funding, the additional $49,000 is a community development block grant, right?
So it all, talking to, so it's managed out of the city manager's office. Talking to the staff person who manages it, it is a contract out of the general fund. However, they receive community development block grant funds as an entitlement community. Those funds are to serve low and moderate income persons in the community, and so they're able to sort of backfill in behind it. It doesn't, the federal funds don't go to the operations of the program. We'll make that clear. It comes from the general fund, but the city receives other funds for other projects for low and moderate income persons.
Because of time, I think we just have room for one more question, so.
Sure, can I just add one small
Okay.
bit to that, which is they're serving 107 individuals and then the additional 10 to 12 families as well. So again, as you're thinking about this, $150,000 is a lot of money, but when you look at that, when you break that down and you think about it more in terms of it's about $1,000 a person / $1,000 per site, and then the decreased cost overall to the city in police and other services, there's a tremendous cost benefit. And go ahead.
I do have one other question. The pilot program that you're proposing is just one site.
One site.
And the only concern I have with kind of putting all of our eggs in a single basket is, if it doesn't go well, if this one instance doesn't go well, it might make it difficult to expand the program. And I just didn't know if there was resources or thinking to trying a few different, if it's even possible to do more than one site.
Well, I think that, we've approached this very thoughtfully. There are a lot of people that are working on this, as has been noted. If you want to tell us to do more than one site, I'm not going to say no. But we also want to continue to manage those resources. And so it's not that we wouldn't want to expand the program, but continuing to bring that thoughtfulness into one site. There are a lot of families or individuals, couples that are well-known in our community among service providers that would be great candidates for this program, giving us little reason to believe that we would see a failure.
Okay.
And I think what's also important to us is we want to set this up for success in a way in that we can show the community how this can be a successful program and can help alleviate some of the pressures and concerns that the greater McMinnville area has been feeling.
Thank you.
Our time is up, and what I would suggest that we do is, Remy, thank you for the presentation and the information that has been given to us. I would ask that members of the council, with any further questions, to talk to Remy or talk to Heather, and that when we have our next work session, our regularly scheduled work session, which would be the fourth Tuesday, that if we have time, that we squeeze out maybe 10 minutes to get the pure direction of the council where to go, so that we can have time to disseminate the information. Do you feel comfortable with that as a council?
I do. I also want to say, other than Heather and myself directing questions to Natalie,
Yes.
directing questions to Matt, the chief, and
Jeff and Lindsay also could.
I wouldn't direct questions to them about this. They're not working specifically on this.
specific-
But also, Susan Muir, our Parks and Rec, the city staff those are the city staff members involved in this particular program.
Thank you for the presentation tonight. I think we're much more aware of the opportunities that are in front of us.
Thank you for the
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and it is 7 o'clock. And so what I would like to do is welcome those to our city council tonight. We have started a new process, and that process is at 5:45. We meet in a work session that is open to the public, and typically we are going to take one or two topics during that work session and be able to put more specific time in having a discussion around current issues before the council. That is to go to 6:45, which gives us an opportunity then to break for 15 minutes, and then we will open our council meeting. So we're at the 7 o'clock hour, and I would like to call to order the regularly scheduled city council meeting on February 13th, 2018, and I call it to order. Okay, with that, Adam, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The flag was over here. Yeah, it's right there. Oh, sorry for the movement. I think we did that during our awards presentation. Tonight, we are to that point in our meeting where we invite citizens for public comment. And anyone may speak on any topic other than a topic that is already on the agenda, a matter that is in litigation, a quasi-judicial land matter, or a matter that is scheduled for a public hearing at some future date. We will be taking comments for a 3-minute period, and the whole public comment section or session will not go any longer than 30 minutes. Did we have our sign-up sheet back there? If we can get, have we had any turned in tonight? If we can get those up front. I do also want to just share real briefly that the council is going to be having a work session, a special work session next Wednesday, at which time we are going to have a report to the council that deals with the parking of RVs and cars in the public space. And my understanding is that we will have some direction that will take care of some of the concerns that we've been hearing over the last month and a half. And so we have a very special 2-hour work session a week from tomorrow that we will be taking testimony from staff and coming up with some resolution put before the council. So I wanted to lay that out in front of each of you before we get started. And Steve is asking me what time, if I'm not mistaken, it's 6 o'clock?
5:30.
5:30, and that will be on Wednesday, a week from tomorrow,
21st.
21st. Okay. We have, we'd like to call Jared Miller. Jared, if you'd come up and address the council.
Yeah, that's it. Good day, council members, mayor, staff. My name is Jared Miller. I live at 947 Southeast Ford Street. I haven't came in and sat in here for a while. I've been doing other things, but I thought within 3 minutes while I'm here, before I head home and enjoy the rest of my evening, while you guys enjoy the rest of the evening, I'd just talk for a second. I got a minute to look over the resolutions or any of the minutes that you guys are using tonight. I believe it's like 289 pages you guys have on your website. It's quite the report that you guys, I didn't get enough time to print it out or look over it or anything, but I just was hoping at some point in time I might get a chance. I don't have as much time to be able to look at that stuff, but I assume that if there's any chance to speak on any of that stuff, I just wrote down something that I'm not going to be staying here the entire evening, but I was wondering some of the things that you were going to talk about, and perhaps I might be able to video watch it if I'm not here. But just a note, if it does come up, I was wondering about one of the resolutions that were repealed that were discussing some of the budget about the transportation that you have in your plan. And I've listened to a lot of transportation from the county, and I'm trying to piece some of that together. And I see some of the finance, which I'm sure it's just a oversight of how I look at it, but I show, $16 million in capital improvement costs to the transportation system. And I was just curious about more elaborate, because you went into sewer and sanitation as well, about that repeal and replace that you're working on in that financial aspect. Because I know that budget's coming up soon too, and I'm going to be at least listening in to see, because the last 2 years I have seen the budget at least, while I've engaged in the last couple of years.
So, Jared, just to let you know, what you were looking at is our audit. And so it's looking at our books for the fiscal year that has passed, and our auditors, having audited book, is going to be making a presentation tonight.
That's
but
great.
Any questions
That's
that you
great.
have, feel free to get a hold of me on that.
Of course. Thank you. And then as I walked here this evening, I noticed a few people that I have seen regularly, whether it be at Soup Kitchen or as what you've been discussing, having some issues on the street, and, making multiple zones and using Eugene, which I'm pretty familiar with Eugene as well as some of the drivers that I've seen have come from all over the place. And I know the programs work and there's framework. A lot of the people I know are stuck in McMinnville or have been habitated in McMinnville, to the point where Eugene could be an option if the framework, as you propose, was even to say that St. Vincent de Paul would push them into a zone that would help. And I want to congratulate that report, Remy. That's good. I see that you guys in the last year, 2 years, probably for a long time, even since we were kids, that the homeless and people on the street and the youth, a lot of us grew up at 16, 17 right on the street here, and we're still here today. So, and we're still discussing, and I'm really glad that those committees have branched out. So I'll just go ahead and leave that there are a lot of programs, and I hope that the framework blossoms into avenues of approach that everyone can work with, and hopefully everybody finds their outlet in these programs, such as Champion Team and so forth. I just wrote down like 12 different places, and Union Gospel Mission is one of the big ones as well. So I appreciate your time. God bless.
Thank you, Jared. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Griffin Zollner.
Good evening. Griffin Zollner, reside at Hidden Meadow Drive. And, this evening I just wanted to come. I think we're all aware of everything. Mayor, you had mentioned the special meeting that's going to be happening a week from tomorrow. And my whole intent really was just to thank everybody on the council, as well as, if you was here, the chief and Captain Simons in terms of their involvement in their activity. I've been in communication with them and am appreciative in terms of, what they've been able to share and inform us, and to share with everybody. No less than a dozen people here this evening that were here at the previous meetings are here again tonight for the same issues, the same cause, and the same concerns. So I'll leave it short and sweet, but I just want to thank everybody for their efforts thus far. We're looking forward to, hearing what comes out of that next week, and hopefully finding some level of resolve to this fairly quickly. So.
Well, it will be an open formatted meeting, so anyone that would like to be a part of that and listen to the report that's going to come to the council, feel free to come. It will be here in this open format type of thing, and so neighbors and those of interest, please come out and hear what's going to be given to the council.
Okay, yeah, I think we will. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have one, Jacob Miller. Rebecca?
It's my wife, Valerie.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead and have a seat.
Thank you. Good evening.
And could you, if you have an address, could you give it to us?
I don't.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I live in an RV. I'd like to say I live in my body, but I have a house too that I reside in. It's just mobile. And that's what I'm here to talk about a little bit. And
Okay.
some of the things that I've heard, and mainly just the concerns. I also heard there's another, what you were talking about, I think another meeting to hear about what you guys have come up with. And it's really to bring forth the concern of the verbiage that I heard in here. The chief's not here. I was kind of wanting to kind of put it before him too. The by right versus by loophole. And that I think that really wasn't a good way to articulate it and keep the peace. It brought about, there was a lot more harassment our way after some of that verbiage. And I think that, I'm stepping out on a limb a little bit, but it would seem that was more encouraged than slowed down. Whereas it's very easy it seemed for him to determine with his legal team that it was a by right issue. And so the truck issue is taken care of, it's by right. Well, those guys, I'm sorry, I feel for you, I think, and that's by loophole. And that's not the case. I'm here today, I was put in jail for living in an RV on a city street by the city of McMinnville. Okay, that case was thrown out not because of a loophole, it was because it was unconstitutional. It was unconstitutionally vague. Okay, it was unconstitutional, that's why. Okay, and I would hope that this council and the people on this council hold to and have taken an oath to the Constitution, this state and this country's, because that is the first and foremost. That is what this is about. It's not about people's privileged opinions, and I don't want to look at this and I don't want to look at that. Okay, we're all people. We're all people here. We're all in the society together. Okay, just because somebody's of a lesser economic status does not make them the new person that gets to take the hate and gets to take the bad attention, the negativity, and that's what it's become. And I can see that. I didn't have the time, and I didn't think that you guys would want to hear rant and rave about the history of McMinnville and some of the laws that used to be on the books that segregated people here and that took people out of towns and didn't allow them to do things. But if one wanted to look that up, they could find it out. And it seems that the poor are the new people of that. People of a lower economic status. Not that they haven't been since the beginning of time. They may have been, but now they're not somebody that's protected. They're looked at as people that have found a loophole. I was looked at as somebody that found a loophole. I didn't find a loophole. I'm living. I'm making do with what I have. I'm not asking anybody for anything. And I don't think it would matter if I did. Because if I was out there asking, I get hated. And if I'm not out there asking, I get hated. I get moved around, I get hated on. Chief Scales was very nice about accommodating. I'm sure he would have took me to jail again if it was within his power to do so. If it was within his power, just so everybody back there knows. I'm pretty sure he would, but it wasn't. It wasn't. He already did it once. He already made that decision, guys. He already made that decision for you. Okay, that happened. That happened. It did. And it was over living in an RV on a city street, over trying to use a code, a zoning code, not even using the proper procedures that are written down that I was able at one time to read You're supposed to go through the city recorder. You're supposed to go to council. You're supposed to do it. None of those things were followed. I was taken to jail on a warrant that was it was signed when the judge was out of town. You know? I mean, that's how justice was prevailing here, and I hope that it doesn't continue to go that way. I hope that in this next meeting, we hear some good things.
Not just
I'm a member of this community, too.
We, just like Jared said, you know, we were on the streets when we were younger, and we're still here, and we're raising our families, and we're doing what we can in the situation that we're given in. McMinnville's changed in the last 10 years. We've been here for, like I said, since my kids were born here, he was born here. It's changed a lot. And when there was a time where low-income people could go to certain parts of town and rent an apartment for, $5.95, it's not like that anymore. I can't, even if I wanted to, we couldn't go out and rent an apartment, And a lot of our neighbors that are living in RVs, they're waiting for housing. They're sick people that are on disability, most of them. Some of them are old vets. But none of them are doing what's been accused on us. We're not throwing trash out and making a mess or dumping our tanks on the ground. I mean, all these, accusations that are so bothersome to me because I have friends in this community and family in this community. People can see this and they know me and they're like, I can't believe they're saying this about your family. My kids are old enough to read and watch this stuff. They're not babies, some of them are, but they can see what's going on at 14 and 15 years old, and it scares them because they know that we've raised them to be the best human beings that they can be to all people. And to see us be treated like this is because of we live differently, and people don't want to see it.
It's not the right message. It's not the right message for the kids. It's not the message for the next generation.
For our community at all.
It's not the right message to represent the community.
Well, our 3 minutes are up. We thank you for your comments, because we will listen, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Hearing none, we will now move to a presentation, and on January the 29th, we had the inaugural Mayor's Award event and recognition. It's something that we are going to, we started this year and we will continue on an annual basis. We presented that evening 2 types of awards. Our first award was something that we designated as the Pillar of Community Award, which recognizes unique and exemplary contributions for building a stronger McMinnville. That evening, we recognized Steve, I think Steve Ropp, who's in the audience for his work on art. We recognized Roger Hall, who is the chair of our Planning Commission. And then we recognized McMinnville Urban Renewal Advisory Committee for their work on the Urban Renewal District. And then we also that evening recognized an individual who received what we're calling the Mayor's Legacy Award. And this award is presented to an individual who has made a profound and lasting impact on the McMinnville community. And so with that, we know who that is because we awarded it that night, but Mr. Dave Hogelberg was out of town with family, and so we wanted to take a few minutes tonight to recognize Dave, and so we've got a video presentation, so if we could turn the video on.
We are honored to recognize an extraordinary man today. His commitment, his passion, his unwavering ability to take on big tasks is his legacy and our reward. He can literally build roads connecting people and projects. His general approach, his fierce tenacity, his monumental generosity, all are the reasons we present the inaugural Mayor's Legacy Award to McMinnville's own Dave Hogelberg. His commitment to our community began when Dave moved to McMinnville in the 1960s after completing his law degree at the University of Oregon. Within the first 10 years of his residency, he was honored as an outstanding junior citizen at the Distinguished Service Awards, became a law firm partner, a Linfield trustee, and president of Mid-Valley Rehabilitation, now known as NV Advancements, of which Dave is still the president. More recently, he served as the chair of the board of directors at Linfield. He is the president of the McMinnville Community Foundation, a member of the McMinnville Leadership Council, and perhaps his biggest claim to fame, serving as the chair of the Yamhill County Parkway Committee. Now, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that the Newburgh-Dundee bypass would not have been completed without the effort, the tenacity, the passion, and hope exemplified by Dave Hogelberg. Dave is truly the hero of the bypass. Starting the bypass committee 30 years ago, it is through his continual effort and commitment to fixing one of the largest challenges facing the area, and we are able to drive phase 1 of the bypass today. Dave does not put himself before the things he accomplishes. Rather than attaching his name to the thousands of people that he has helped and projects that he has been instrumental in completing, he allows those accomplishments to shine on their own because he knows that someone else must pick up the reins. He has built those programs for the future to allow them to move forward with others leading the way. The list of Dave's accomplishments and contributions to McMinnville's community is long. A few highlights include being named McMinnville's first citizen in 1993, receiving a Linfield Community Award in 2004, receiving the Yamhill County Bar Association's Bob Payne Award in 2004, being an active participant in the McMinnville Housing for the Homeless Subcommittee, and being named Chehalem's Valley First Citizen in 2013. His most recent effort in leading the fundraising for the Yamhill County Gospel Rescue Mission, for which he is now the vice chair of the board of directors. Now, Dave is an active and proud family man. His loving wife, Kathy, is often found by his side. She is active in the community as well and has been recognized with the Distinguished Service Award as Woman of the Year. He is the proud father of daughters Diane Hogelberg and Karen Hogelberg. Dave is a great friend, a skilled visionary, and masterful catalyst. It is with the utmost respect and regard that I, the mayor of the city of McMinnville, present the inaugural Legacy Award to Dave Hogelberg. Mr. David. We really wanted to do this when we had our presentation, but here is our Legacy Mayor's Award for leadership and all that you've done. And as has been said, this is just not for one or two little things. This is for a legacy of what you've left for this community. We salute you. We hope there's going to be many to follow your example. But any words for us?
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, staff, and an incredible community, I just have a few words, and one of them is to recognize my wife, Kathy, who's here, my daughter, Karen, Diane, my other daughter, and the twin tornadoes that are here with them, and tell you how much our lives have been enriched by being a part of this incredible community. So, Mr. Mayor, for that, we are deeply thankful. I've had a head start on thinking of what I might say, and after a lot of time, there are not words to express one's appreciation for an incredible recognition like this, Mr. Mayor and council members. So let me only say that my life has been enriched, and I'm incredibly indebted to being a part of this community and all that all of you do. And so, in a word, thank you, and it's not enough, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. It's really nice. Well, thank you, Hucklebergs. This takes us to what we're going to have as a joint meeting of the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency and the City Council. And we'll have a presentation of our audit report for the fiscal year 2016-17. And so I'm going to go ahead and open the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency meeting. And this will be joint. And so I'm going to turn a presentation over to Marcia to introduce our auditor, and then we'll have that joint meeting. So, Marcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned, we do have Ms. Tanya Moffett with us tonight, and she's a partner with Marina and Company, LLP. This is the second year that Marina and Company has performed our financial statement audits for the city and the Urban Renewal Agency. And this year they also performed a single audit. So I'd like to actually tell you a little bit about Tanya. She is on the Oregon Board of Accountancy CPE Committee, the OSCPA Governmental Accounting and Auditing Strategic Committee, the Leadership Development Strategic Committee, the Not-for-Profit Strategic Committee. She's also served as a reviewer for the GFOA Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting Awards program and is a former co-chair of the Accounting Standards Review Committee for the Oregon GFOA. And there's probably a whole bunch of things that I missed there, Tanya, but I just want to express, I guess, how fortunate I feel to be that we are working with Tanya and her firm and her staff. She just shows an excellent leadership. They're extremely professional. They're very helpful. And as you can see by her credentials, she is just really a tremendous resource for us. So I wanted to mention that Tanya met with the Audit Committee this afternoon, Council President Minke and Mayor Hill. And she did go over the results of the audit at that time, and she is here this evening to present that information to the Urban Renewal Agency Board and the City Council. And with that, Tanya, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you, Marcia. Honorable Mayor and City Council members and City staff, I am here to present the June 30, 2017 financial statements for the City of McMinnville. And I'm happy to report that the financial statement audit has a clean opinion or an unmodified opinion. That's the highest level of a financial statement audit opinion that we can give. I'd also like to point out that the city's financial statements are a comprehensive annual financial report. This is a special award that the city received from the Government Finance Officers Association, and this is an award that takes city staff numerous hours to put together. They're going above and beyond what is required of them to put together for the financial statements. For example, there's a statistical section in the back of the financial statements that has 10 years worth of data. So I just want to point that out because there is a distinguished award that the city received for the June 30, 2016 financial statements, and we anticipate that they will also receive that for the June 30, 2017 financial statements. I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that we do there is an auditor's report in the back of the financial statements that is for Oregon minimum standards. So the Oregon State Legislature has asked all municipal auditors in the state of Oregon to look at a few things that are not necessarily financial related. And so that includes looking at ORS 279, which is public purchasing laws, to ensure that the city is following those rules appropriately for advertising for like public purchasing of a contract or something like that. So I'm happy to report that under those standards and the specific things that the Oregon legislature has asked us to look at, we had no findings for the city of McMinnville. For the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency, we also had a clean opinion or an unmodified opinion, and we also had no findings for the minimum standards. I would like to also report on the single audit. So what this is any time that the city receives and spends over $750,000 of federal funds, then there's a special audit that we do that goes in and looks at all of the compliance requirements that are associated with that to ensure that the city is in compliance with those grant requirements. I'm happy to report that the reports that we do for this, the Government Auditing Standards report or a GAS report, is also a clean opinion. There's no findings for that. And then also the report on the single audit and the major federal programs is also a clean opinion and an unmodified report. So I'm happy to report that city staff was very willing to give us anything that we asked for, and the records were in order. Everything that we looked at was in a great condition, so I'm happy to report that we have a clean opinion on all three of the financial statements that I present here tonight. Does anybody have any questions for me?
So what I'll do right now is the audit committee, we met with Tanya for about an hour prior to our work session tonight, and Kelly and myself and Marcia were able to go in very much more detail than tonight. And so I'm just going to call on Kelly for a moment to, with her background as a CPA, and we've been doing this on the audit committee for probably 10 plus years. Yeah. So Kelly, if you could just give your opinion from a council perspective, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Well, although it's not necessarily that the auditor and the staff have to be big friends, but there's a great deal of respect between our auditor, Tanya, and Marcia, which is very nice to see. It appears that they have a good working relationship. I feel just watching Tanya over the last couple of years that she is an extremely thorough and obviously she's a very qualified auditor of governmental type entities. I guess the overall feeling is we went through it in a great deal of detail. I thought there was some really interesting information, I think on page 91 and such, where you're looking at the 10-year statistical information, although that isn't necessarily audited, it is part of the overall package that's presented. So a lot of good questions. I'm sure if you, as you look through it, you might have any questions. She's more than willing to answer them for you. I don't think this is something everybody got through in the last 3 days, but it was a very good meeting, and I personally feel very good about this whole process.
Thank you, Council President Menke. Again, Kelly made mention of pages 134 and 135 and 137 and 138, which gives you a historical 10-year look at where we've been, and that tells a story in and of itself. You know, something that we've talked quite a bit about is PERS, and on page 91, if you want to get a little more in-depth look at PERS and the city of McMinnville, that would be where you might turn. Two questions that I asked, and I thought it was very important, was number one, I asked Tanya how our staff interrelated with her, because it really can show if things are happening the right way. Is there secrecy or those types of things? And I think that's the kind of question a council needs to be asking of their auditor. And Tanya said it was just, so open. The partnershiping, they're working together to make a a report to the council, because our auditors, they don't work for Marcia, they work for us as a council. And then I turned it around and I asked Marcia, how did her staff feel about our auditors? Because we're going to have an opportunity to renew a contract in the next couple of years, and we wanted to make sure that we felt that they did a good job representing the financials so that we as a city council could feel very comfortable with the results of that audit. And both of those came back, as Kelly indicated. There's a tremendous partnership that has developed, and we're thankful for that. But more importantly, the years on the audit committee, I can just tell you that, we talk about legacies. Well, we have a legacy of financial excellence here, doing it the right way, being conservative. I'm so excited about the strategic plan coming up, because we've got lots of needs, and we've got a lot of how to take care of the assets that are ours, and we need to do it thoughtfully. And I think it fits well. This renewal of our direction with the strategic plan is going to allow us to be fiscally sound for years and years to come. So I'll just open it up to any questions that would come from councilors. Seeing none, thank you, Tanya.
Yes,
Again,
thank you very much.
you have a little drive home, but thank you for spending at least half your day with us today. And then, Marcia, if you take back to your staff how much we appreciate their work. They're always there to support us, tell us, help us do the things that need to happen, but they're kind of unsung heroes because they're not seen as much as some of the other departments. So, again, thank you. Tanya, thanks.
I certainly will do that, Mr. Mayor, and I guess along with that, it really takes not only my finance and accounting staff to produce this clean opinion, but really all of the city departments that are very conscious of internal controls and compliance and doing things the right way. So I feel like it's really an award that the entire city can be proud of.
And I would agree. Okay, with that, I will now close the I will go ahead and close the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency portion of our meeting. I'm getting good at using whatever I need to, just as long as I don't break it, right? That takes us this evening to our consent agenda. And on our consent agenda this evening, we have the minutes of our January 17th, 2018 special called city council meeting. I'm going to ask if there would be anyone that would want us to remove any item off of our consent agenda and be heard at the regular place on the agenda. Hearing none, I will ask for a motion.
I so move.
And a second.
Second.
It has been moved by Council President Menke and seconded by Councilor Garvin. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This consent agenda passes unanimously in a 6-6 favor. That takes us to this evening to our resolution 2018-8, a resolution establishing revised system development charges, SDCs, pertaining to parks and recreation, sanitary sewer, and transportation, and repealing resolution number 2017-6. So I'll call on Mike to present to the council.
It's not mine. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. And before I chat about this particular item that's on your agenda, I did want to take the time to introduce one of my staff members this evening. Lauren Blinko is here. She's our public affairs specialist and has been with the city since mid-September. She's doing some tremendous things for us to help us tell our story.
We've got a little feedback.
I understand. That happens a lot when I talk.
We just need to ask the staff member, right?
Usually a different kind of feedback. Anyway, I did want to take the chance this evening to introduce Lauren. She has been doing some tremendous things for us in terms of public outreach and helping tell our story in community development. There are several enhancements to our website, as well as we've launched social media for the department. She's made improvements to the weekly construction updates that we provide, including a mapping feature that's on our website. And we're excited to have Lauren on board with us. She's here this evening first to meet you, but also to hear the discussion on system development charges, because she'll help spread the word for the rate increase if that moves forward after this evening's discussion. So,
Welcome, Lauren. It's good to have you here, and you're tucked away back in the corner, and so next time I come in, I will stop in and say hi. Okay.
So with that, I would like to introduce the brief staff report that's in your packet, as well as copies of the System Development Charge Ordinance, Ordinance 4980, Resolution 2017-06, which is the resolution you will repeal this evening if you move the draft resolution forward, and then a summary spreadsheet that shows the impact of the proposed rate increase that's before you. So your System Development Charge Ordinance allows for the adjustment annually of the System Development Charge rates based on an inflationary index. The index that's codified in the ordinance is an engineering news record index that is based out of Seattle. The engineering news record has a number of cities that they track construction costs for, and Seattle is the nearest one to us that represents Northwest construction cost. And so the proposed 7.7% increase that you have before you this evening is the growth in the construction cost index from January 2017 to January 2018, and reflects the trends for construction costs in the Northwest. Generally speaking, these resolutions that are before you are considered a housekeeping item, although this is a significant rate increase, certainly larger than we've had in recent history. So with that, I would certainly entertain any questions. I would point to the last page summary of what the impact is for across sanitary sewer, parks, and transportation, and note that for a single-family residential permit, the 7.7% increase will translate to a $575 per unit rate increase, and that rate increase would be effective July 1st for any permits that are applied on or after July. So with that, I'll be quiet, and I doubt the feedback will go away, though.
Thank you, Mike. So let's turn to the council. Any questions, and then we'll have discussion. Any questions for Mike for clarification purposes? Alan?
Thank you, Mike. Being a developer builder, those who pay those increases are part of my industry that I'm in, so I should say something about that with Wendy, who's also got an interest in that. Has this been notified publicly that this would be coming apart, and could you explain that process that's happened?
So there wasn't a special notice that was posted regarding tonight's action. Our normal course of action is after council consideration. We'll post notice at the permit counter, provide copies of the rate increase in packets that go out for builders. Additionally, Heather and her group are having a meet and greet with the building community in early March, and we'll have a flyer for them to distribute at that meeting as well. So the outreach will occur post-council discussion, if you will.
Okay, so, yeah, before any decisions made, of course, by the council, that would have to happen for sure to get input from the building community. How are we doing? So thank you, Mayor. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have, Kelly?
I personally, this is written into our law. It's a housekeeping item. I do not see the necessity for a public hearing on this. if that's what Alan's suggesting. Councilor Rudin, is that what you're
I'm
suggesting?
sorry? Yes, that's what I'm saying, is that have a meeting, if you want to call it a public hearing, that the voice of the community in that respect could be heard publicly?
My comment on this is that costs are going up, and overall, this is reflecting the costs of everyone in this community.
Yeah.
And the city is traditionally behind the ball, usually, in these types of things. So it takes much longer for us to catch up to a rate increase. And so I just feel like it should be treated more like a housekeeping item and just taken at face value and voted on tonight by the council.
So let's have some more discussion and get some more input from counselors as to their feelings. Go ahead, Remy, and then Wendy, and then Saul, and then Adam.
I'm just wondering if you can recap the part about how this is related to Seattle-based costs. I'm sorry, it was kind of there was something distracting me to fully capture all of that. If you could just. And then what are the components that feed that construction cost index? Labor one was the one I was wondering if that was part of it. So, and I'm sorry because I know this is asking. Do you happen to know if Seattle has seen similar changes in their minimum wage thresholds like we've experienced here? Yeah, okay. All right. Just ultimately just trying to figure out that why this year the increase is so significant. That's because the Royals lost.
Yeah, that explains it. Okay.
Thank you, Remy. And Mike, thank you for that explanation of the index being in Seattle. Wendy?
Okay, I have a couple of questions. One is when the index goes down, so we track ups and downs. Whatever the index says, that's how we adjust our SDCs. How common is that? Is that a common practice in our neighboring communities that they do that, or how did that come about?
So it is common in the SDC work, it's not an inflationary rate that's built into it. The premise of this is developed are you have a set of capital projects that are necessary to drive development, growth in the community. And what you're trying to do is recover some of the costs of those capacity added projects through a system development charge. And so, for example, a 2010 transportation
comparison with our neighboring communities, have you seen where we are in relation to SDCs? Are we low, like the planning department is low with its fees? Do you know where we are in relation to neighboring communities with regards to SDCs?
So I don't have a current system development charge comparison. There was one that was prepared a couple of years ago by the League of Working Cities, and historically McMinnville's system development charges are some of the lowest in the state. But again, I'm not comfortable using that as a reason to recommend a rate increase. Really, we need to decide as a community what the level of increase should be and then move forward with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Sal?
Can I just add, I don't have any empirical data. I can tell you that in my experience, the construction cost index is commonly used. I can't tell you that it's used by most jurisdictions. It tends to be over a long period of time a more stable index than using CPI, for instance. So I do know that at least the jurisdictions that I've worked for in Oregon have tended to use the CPI and often include a similar code language to we have that automatically indexes SDCs to the CCI.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Mayor? Sal?
What percentage of costs associated with system development charges do we actually recoup through SDCs, roughly?
That would be something I need to look up for you, Sal. It varies across the three areas that we collect. When the Parks SDC was set in the early 2000s, the council they looked at the list of needs versus what they determined the community could afford, and they set the SDC level appropriately. Kelly, you'll recall the discussions we had on transportation where the need was at one level, and we said that we were going to recover at a lower level. I can certainly run those numbers for you, Sal. I don't have them in my head.
Well, we met a few days ago, and you gave me some rough ideas, and maybe you could share some of that thinking with. I mean, I'd appreciate it if you don't feel confident in the numbers you shared with me last week, then you should probably go back and look at them. But if you do feel somewhat confident that they were in the ballpark of accurate, I'd ask that you share that.
I can say with certainty that we're recovering a lower level through SDCs than the cost of those projects to address growth. And that's a pretty common occurrence across communities in Oregon. There are probably very few, if any, that recover 100% cost of the development impact through SDCs. So,
how would we compare to comparable cities? Like, how do we compare, say, to Redmond or to other cities that are of comparable size?
So there's two metrics you can compare. One is the total cost of SDCs in the community, and that certainly is the previous discussion we had, and we're generally quite low compared to other communities. But the second metrics, which is equally as important, is what is the impact that you're trying to address through system development charges. And I've not seen a detailed comparison of Redmond's trying to recover $100 million worth of growth through SDCs, and they set their levels at $50 million. I've not seen that detailed analysis, but I think that's where the local discussion is best influenced. We know we have X amount of need, and we did that when we adopted a wastewater plan, and a park plan, and a transportation plan. How much of that need is going to be absorbed community-wide, and how much of that need is going to be absorbed through or received through fees on development as it's occurring. And we're roughly in the 50% range, where we're recovering about half the impact through fees, and the other half the entire community is sharing.
Thank you.
Does that get to the question?
Thank you.
Adam, did you have any comments?
The 7.7 definitely gives me pause as far as it seems like quite a bit for a single year. So I would agree with Alan there that there's probably going to be some pushback from that building community, but I think the one number I'm interested in the most is what Mike just touched on, and that's how much are we actually recapturing through SDCs versus what's our capital outlay cost. And if we're at that 50% and this 7.7% increase keeps us at that 50%, then I'm fairly comfortable with voting on it tonight. There is a cost of growth, and that's what this is designed to protect. And I would hate to see the stewardship of the councils before us, fall behind because we didn't want to enact a larger than preferred rate increase, even though the economy's in a great spot, and we just approved a lot of subdivision buildability over the last year, and so I think there's going to be a lot of permits pulled, and so if we don't enact it now, I think we set ourselves up to be put behind the curve a year from now.
Thank you, Alan. Or Adam, Alan, you have further comment?
Mayor, we didn't hear anything Adam said because of...
They're working on it, but they've muted it, so at least the buzz isn't.
Oh, I'm not sure what you said, Adam. I don't know. I guess...
Again, if you want, I'll speak louder.
Okay.
So, the recapture rate is what really interests me, and that 50% number, I think we need to be close to that. We're right there at it, and if the 7.7 is what holds us at that, then I'm comfortable voting on it. If it was the 7.7 pushed us, more around 60 or something, then I would be way more apt to have a public hearing and let the builders, voice their concerns. But the reality is we've approved a lot of subdivision capacity over the last year, and so if we don't keep that 50% recapture rate there currently and enact it July 1, when those permits start to get pulled and the subdivision plots go in, we're going to be behind the curve years moving forward, and that worries me if we were to not enact a rate increase right now.
Thank you, Adam. I think that I'm not saying that I'm against this resolution. I agree with Councilperson Kelly Menke in that we're significantly behind other communities in what we charge. For instance, Newburgh, who's the next, just below us in population, but fairly close to our city. They're significantly higher for some reason. I'm not sure what that reason is, but so I'm not saying I'm against the resolution. What I'm against is that we don't give public time to weigh in on this. The building community its fingers go out in a lot of different directions, and prices have gone up, no question about it, just recently, significant. Adding another increase of cash up front SDC fees that the builder pays or developer pays adds to that, even the increased costs. So it's something that I think because of the nature of the building community with subcontractors, with suppliers,
Not working right now, so
Okay.
speak as loud as you can.
At any rate, I hate to delay this, how long would it take to do a public hearing?
Well, just for clarification, the action that's before you, the fees would go into effect
Thank you.
on July 1
That's
of this
correct.
year. So, and it's a resolution, so it goes into effect upon adoption, but the fees aren't effective until July 1. So if the council wants there to be some outreach or to schedule a public hearing or whatever public engagement you prefer, we still have time to do that and have the action in place to be effective July 1. So that's really at the council's discretion.
I guess my one other thing because I've sat through many of these hearings involving SDC increases, and I know exactly how the hearing's going to go, and nothing probably is going to be changed by it. So, the builders don't want an increase, obviously. And they will come and say that. How does that necessarily change the situation when we are constantly behind?
It might not change
It's not on.
It might not change the situation at all, other than giving our community a chance to weigh in on it.
Yeah.
It is a significant number of monies that people have to invest in their projects. And July 1st is not a long way away.
I'm aware of that.
That's historically why we brought these resolutions to you at the beginning of the calendar year to allow us to put the notice out to the community that the rate increase is going to affect on July 1. So that's why it's before you this evening. And historically, that's a method that we've used because it is an inflationary rate increase. It's not a discussion about should we be charging the fees, or it's not a discussion of what projects we should be charging for. Those much larger public discussions we had when we adopted the revised transportation fee. It's purely reflecting the cost of business has gone up over the past year, the cost of the project has gone up, and you're trying to keep up with that cost increase.
Absolutely.
Based on some of the other recent changes that we've looked at in regards to SDCs, would it be accurate and true to also say that, save for the Parks and Rec SDCs, anybody that was building affordable housing would have an exemption from these SDCs?
That's correct.
Sal?
I just want to make a comment. I am sympathetic to Mr. Rudin's suggestion that this should be a public process and people be invited to comment and participate. That said, I am prepared to vote on this increase tonight. I think that it is a reasonable rate increase, even though it's high. If we decide to go the route of opening a full hearing on this, I would appreciate more information from staff on our system development charges compared with other system development charges. And I would be also open to revisiting the question of whether a 50% recapture rate, which is the number that I think we finally got to, is sufficient to continue meeting the needs of the community. So I guess my comment on a public hearing is, if we're going to consider a public hearing, I'm open to other numbers and more information to make sure that we're actually adequately capturing the costs of these system development charges fully. And although this is a significant rate increase, if it keeps us well below other similarly situated communities, then maybe that hearing should actually consider that as well. Look at the full picture as opposed to just this one issue. If we're just looking at the 6.6% rate increase and staff says that's adequate, I'm open to voting on that, but I'm also open to having a hearing and having a broader conversation about system development charges and the rate of recapture.
I can fully support Counselor.
So with that being said, I think what I'm going to do at this point is move forward, and so I will ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2018-8.
I move that we approve motion, I'm sorry.
2018-8.
Yeah, 2018-8. My apologies.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. And so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Okay, so this resolution passes 4-6, or excuse me, 4 in favor and 2 in opposition. And so it passes with those numbers. Thank you. That takes us now to advice and informational items this evening. Reports from counselors on committee and board assignments. Adam, I'll start with you.
We're starting to get I think we have all our hardware put in now for our new system with Wycom, and will be on site, I believe the end of March. And we're still shooting for that October 1 to go live for that new system.
Thank you, Adam. Sal, I don't know committee assignments, but you've had an opportunity to meet with many department heads, and the ramp-up period is going fast and furious, I would guess.
The learning curve is still significant, but I'm enjoying it.
Again, welcome tonight and for your participation. Kelly?
I had the honor of going and testifying at the Joint Transportation Committee in Salem this week, or last week, and it was very interesting. We're trying to do some tweaking with House Bill 4060 in order to, my brain's gone tonight, in order to get more accountability from ODOT and to enlarge on the scope of what we can spend the money on. And they listened to us very favorably. It was a good, interesting meeting. We're a little bit unsure of whether they'll hold the ODOT to more accountability that we asked for, but that was the only thing they questioned us on.
Thank you, Kelly. Thursday night, or Thursday morning, we have the Parkway Committee meeting, which I'm sure we're going to follow up on the discussion that happened last Friday. Wendy, any reports? Thank you, Wendy. Remy? Okay. Elise? The loss. Yep. Thank you. Alan? Okay. Thank you, Alan. Let's go ahead, department head reports, Marcia? Thank you, Marcia. Scott, anything? Okay. Okay. Thank you for your efforts tonight, though. I know you. Heather?